The ether, a fertile plain of existence, in which a master cultivator navigates an ocean of stars. With him, his apprentice, a young mage who will soon discover all is not as it seems, as he unveils the tales of the verse. Once again, two figures stood in a magnificent garden which lied at the center of all creation. The master and his apprentice, Horus Penn, gazed out over the height of the tower, admiring the beautiful scene that shone before them. "How have you been settling in, Horus?" the master said reminiscently, wearing a knowing smile. Horus pulled away from his thoughts, and recognizing that the master had said this before, wore a knowing smile of his own. "I must say, I definitely feel different from the last time you asked me that question. Much of what I once held as important is distant, like a fond memory. Much of what feels important in the moment can fade as our perspective increases. After all, you've paid witness to worlds changing, entire nations rising to new eras, and greatest of all, the changing of hearts and minds. These are the virtues that pass all things and bring about the growth of the universe." Horus, nodding in satisfied agreement, simply replied, "Truly. And I feel ready for whatever comes next." "Good. Then you'll be ready for this additional task." Horus gave his master an inquisitive look. "What is this additional task?" "Oh, it is of great importance, a task of immeasurable challenge, and it will require all that you have learned thus far." The burden and intrigue of the master's words pulled Horus in, captivating his attention. Horus, focusing in, listened closely as the master finished speaking. "You must go to the plane of the Sorcerers, and there you must teach a young boy." "A young boy? This is of most importance?" "Well, I believe I can manage such an endeavor." "Excellent. Your belief will be essential to accomplishing this task." "But what could he learn from me? What am I to teach him?" "Magnus, as he is known, is a very gifted sorcerer, one of the most naturally gifted ever to wander the ether. The Order of the Sorcerers believe him to be the chosen one, meant to bring peace and prevent a great calamity from destroying all of existence. But he has yet to make that decision for himself." "And what role do I play?" Horus asked. The master's face took on a serious look as he replied to Horus. "Voss will undoubtedly take notice of the boy." Horus straightened himself as the master mentioned the vile one's name. "I believe we can give him a better alternative than anything Voss has to offer." The magnitude of the Master's words settled on Horus's mind, giving pause to his response. Resolutely, Horus finally said, "I know firsthand what Voss is capable of. I will see it done." At these words, the Master stepped forward. His demeanor shifted slightly as he reached for Horus's face, and with a knowing smile gazed into Horus's eyes as a father would his son, and said, "I know you will, as you always have." With the Master's final words, everything around Horus faded into light. And in an instant, Horus found himself in a tall chamber within the plane of the Sorcerers. High winds blew across the mouth of Meridian's cave. The entrance, though large, rarely had light peek in. The darkness of the cave cast a deep shadow that was too difficult to see beyond, making the large chasm appear as a giant gaping maw that never seemed to close. A black stone golem with blazing eyes like that of a smoldering flame called out as he stepped forward toward the edge of the cave.
"Master Meridian."
"Yes, Bridge Master. How goes the watch?"
A voice said from within the cave. The Bridge Master knelt before the cave in a ceremonious bow, and hearing the inquiry replied,
"The watch of the bridge goes well, and the sun yet shines."
This was to say, among the sorcerers and wizards, all is well.
"Good. What news do you bring?"
Meridian's voice said from the darkness.
"Master Meridian, a visitor has come, sent by the Master himself. He claims he knows you, and he appears to be a mage."
"A mage, you say?"
"Indeed."
"What is his name?"
"He is called Horus Penn."
As the Bridge Master said this, two sapphire eyes pierced the darkness, glowing like diamonds in the heart of the earth. In a single motion, a large shadow burst from the cave over the Bridge Master and soared out towards the sky. At the Tower of Welcoming, where all travel to enter the plane, Horus stood waiting for the Bridge Master's return, gazing upon the many floating islands that hovered nearby. This was a highway and a meeting place for many sorcerers, wizards, and mages. This was the great plain of Thaumotok, the realm of the sorcerers. A vast world filled with those who defended the Aether, passing through as a place to rest or find guidance to their next assignment. But for Horus, this was the place the Master had sent him with a specific task to fulfill. Unlike the planes Horus had previously visited, this one was fully aware of the Master's endeavors, for across the Aether many knew something of the Master, either recognizing him as the creator or as a higher being, Yet, only among the Order of the Sorcerers was his nature truly known. It was the first place in all of his travels where Horus felt like himself. As sorcerers ascended and descended from the plateau, Horus could sense the great abundance of magic that permeated this existence. Such power seemed to course even through his veins. Carried away by the vast energy that surrounded him, Horus closed his eyes and drifted into thought.
Enjoying the sights, are we?
Meridian announced abruptly. Thrown off guard and having fallen to his back, Horus quickly stood to his feet. You'd think by now I would have grown accustomed to your abrupt antics. It seems you still seem to surprise me, Horus said with amusement. Meridian was far from usual in appearance. While most sorcerers were humanoid in appearance, Meridian was a large, technicolor-like dragon. His scales shifted with an effervescent sheen, randomly changing their colors. Most of the time, however, Meridian would will his great scaly armor to a deep blue or a crimson red, often reflecting his mood in the present moment. His horns were slightly curved in an allocated crescent atop his head, while his body was serpentine, and though he had no wings, he still soared across the sky as though he were swimming upriver. Meridian grabbed the edge of the plateau and gazed down upon Horus.
You're smaller than I remembered. Are you shrinking?
Well, last we met, I recall you being in the form of an old man. Are you beginning to lose your memory? Meridian snickered at the response, and with a jovial laugh replied,
Of course. I only get wiser as I grow older. Perhaps it is you who is forgetting.
Looking at one another, the two old friends finally shared a laugh. Oh, it has been some time.
It has indeed. Come now, climb upon my back, and regale me of your tales through the ether. We have business to attend to.
Horus promptly followed the invitation, and scaled Meridian's back. Once Horus was mounted near his horns, Meridian let go of the edge and soared off through the sky. As they approached their destination, Horus finished retelling his adventures to Meridian, who listened intently, even as the wind blew by his pointed ears.
Quite extraordinary. What a wondrous journey you've had, my friend.
Meridian said with a jovial declaration.
Experiences like that often change the soul, shift the mind, and most especially teaches one a great many things. Do you find that to be the case?
Meridian's question dug deep into Horus's mind, taking a moment to truly ponder the question he proposed. Well, I certainly don't feel like the young mage that once darkened the Master's halls 3 years ago. Though, without sounding too proud, I feel as ready as I can be for anything that should come my way.
Are you? Is that so?
Meridian asked teasingly.
Well, I hope for your sake that you are.
Meridian began to descend as Horus noticed the snickering grin that grew on the dragon's face. Horus began to realize the pattern that both the Master and Meridian seemed to display. Whatever they knew about this boy seemed to overrule the confidence that Horus felt he cultivated so well. Landing on a spacious, floating island, covered in a lush green field, which was divided by a sandstone path, Meridian perched himself between two large, tilted columns. There appeared to be many columns and age structures across the plateau, making it appear archaic and worn by time. Horus took notice as well of the many scorched surfaces that covered the island, causing him to be both curious and a bit wary of what could come next. He quickly deduced that this must be a place of battle, but in the realm of magic, a confrontation of this kind was more of a battle of wits than ability.
We have arrived!
Meridian announced loudly. Battlegrounds? Are you expecting a fight in Thaumaturg?
No, but you should be.
Sure. You know, if you really wanted to duel Meridian, you could have just... Before Horus could finish, a spurt of green fire passed his right shoulder, barely grazing him, causing Horus to drop down and cast a spell in defense. But as Horus spun around, shielding himself from another blast, he beheld a young man with pale white hair floating just above him, who cackled at Horus's reaction.
I've been waiting for you to show up. I've been hearing all day about this so-called masterful mage, and now that you're here, I'm not so sure. Perhaps the real mage is hiding behind Meridian's tail.
Maintaining his protective shield, Horus examined the boy flying over him. Horus noticed the boy had a red flowing cape, well-kept robes, and he wore a face so proud that Horus was immediately skeptical of his ability to temper this would-be pupil. This might be harder than I thought, Horus said to Meridian under his breath.
Indeed it will.
Meridian replied, causing Horus to look back at Meridian and raise a brow.
Horus Penn, meet Magnus Paramouth, the Heralder of Light.
As Meridian announced Magnus's title, Horus took notice of the subtly increasing smirk that stretched across Magnus's face. Meridian continued.
And Magnus, may I introduce you to your mentor, the esteemed Horus Penn, the Unchained Mage.
Bowing before Magnus, being a customary greeting of the Sorcerers, as Horus lifted up his head, he noted a belligerent scoff from the lad. Well, it is an honor to finally meet the Chosen One himself.
And what have you come to teach me? Or did you think you could teach me?
The iris of Magnus' eyes flickered a menacing violet as he spoke. Unfazed by the small demonstration, Horus replied, Only what you're willing to learn. Magnus casually floated toward the ground, still keeping himself slightly above his teacher's head.
Show me.
Horus began to circle around Magnus, taking on a more focused demeanor, attempting to hide his inexperience. How about we start with the basics? Show me a demonstration of an experienced but simple spell. Let's say, Fireball. Uncrossing his arms, Magnus waved his hand effortlessly, and in an instant, a large, unstable ball of flame burst from his hand and collided with a nearby column. Very good. The flames continued to engulf the column, and Horus could sense the boy's impatience. Now, let's see something a little more interesting. Conjure something for me. Perhaps a rabbit, Horus said somewhat sarcastically. But as he did, Magnus snickered and casually stretched forth his right hand. In a matter of seconds, Two behemoth worm-like creatures arose from indigo portals. They had massive, bulging heads, thick, leathery bodies, huge, gaping mouths that dripped a crude saliva, and most terrible of all, they had a noxious and overbearing breath. The two creatures overshadowed Horus and his apprentice, blaring out loud, overwhelming roars of dissatisfaction. It was so sudden that Horus jerked in surprise at the huge beasts towering over him. "All right, well done. Send them back to whatever abyss you conjured them from." Entertained by his own cleverness, Magnus laughed wildly.
What? Not exactly a rabbit, but it certainly burrows like one.
With a wave of his hand, the creatures zipped to the portals they were conjured from and vanished in an instant. Perfect. Now, you can obviously do grandiose magic, but let's see something simpler. I want you to... Before Horus could finish his instruction, Magnus vanished in a spurt of darkness. And before Horus could react, Magnus reappeared right behind him and said loudly,
Like this?
Horus stumbled forward from Magnus's loud announcement. "Yes, like that," Horus said with discontent. In that moment, Horus recognized something about Magnus. Wanting to see what would happen, Horus in his mind stated to himself, "It appears Magnus is undisciplined, reckless, and shows a careless pride." Immediately as Horus thought this, the smirk on Magnus's face vanished, replaced by an utter hatred.
Reckless?
He said indignantly.
I'll show you, reckless.
Pleased at his discovery, Horus donned a small smile and then proceeded his teaching. "Well, at least you're listening to some of my instructions." Magnus's face turned a violent red. "Now, can you demonstrate for me a simple telekinesis?"
Like this?
Magnus said through gritted teeth. Instead of simply waving his hand, Magnus opened both of his hands, lifting them slowly from the waist up, and his eyes began to glow the bright violet. A single column nearby shook from the plateau, wiggling out of the earth, and began floating above Horus's head. "Yes, excellent. Most impressive." Though the response from Horus was positive, Magnus could sense his lack of amazement.
If you thought that was impressive, then you'll enjoy this.
The ground began to tremble, every pebble and stone shaking, as every column on the plateau began to rise all around Horus.
Impressed yet?
Magnus quipped. "Certainly astonishing. I'm sure you'll be ready for the calling of the Chosen One soon enough." The columns began to return to their posts, but Magnus's frustration still simmered. "But can you bridle your emotions as well as you harness your power?" Magnus's eyes flashed.
I am well in control. It's people like you that are afraid you can't control me.
"Really? I'll show you I'm unafraid. Let's try this. Attack me with a mage bolt. Go on." As soon as Horus said this, a smirk returned to Magnus's face. In a single movement, Magnus pointed his hand toward Horus, and a flash of red energy spiraled toward him. Before it could touch Horus, Horus waved his hand in front of him, like a knight would his shield, and a wave of gold and sapphire energy covered his body. blocking the bolt. There. See? I'm not afraid of your power. And I'm not here to control you. Now let's... Another bolt fired from Magnus. Yet to Magnus's surprise, the attack was immediately deflected. The bolt spiraled through the air back towards Magnus, who quickly grabbed the energy and absorbed its menial power.
How did you anticipate that?
Magnus exclaimed with surprise. Studying him thoroughly for a moment, Horus eventually replied, "Your arrogance is making you predictable. You'll need to do better if you're going to catch me off guard." Magnus, feeling censured, scowled at Horus. But feeling foolish, he didn't react this time to his mentor's judgment. Although feeling humble for a moment, the feeling quickly faded, and his anger began to return. As a mage, I use my soul to wield my power. Wizards rely on their minds, but your power as a sorcerer comes from your heart. So how about this time you try using your heart instead of your pride? At Horus's words, Magnus's eyes flickered, sparking like fire to a match, as he focused his stare on Horus.
You wish to see what's in my heart?
Magnus proclaimed.
As you wish.
Horus could detect the change in Magnus's tone and readied himself for what could come next. The air fell still for a moment. But then, every rock, pebble, and piece of loose soil began to rise all around Horus. Slowly, the gravel surrounded Horus.
This is what's in my heart.
Suddenly, the particles of earth soared toward Horus, who quickly formed a flaming shield about him, crystallizing the loose soil and barely protecting him from the now shards of crystalline dust. Not bad for a young spellcaster, Horus said with some breathless condescension.
Not bad, huh? Let me show you something more impressive.
Immediately, Magnus raised a single wave of earth towards Horus, which Horus then rolled to his right to avoid. Returning the attack, Horus thrust two blades of energy, one from each hand. But Magnus simply reached out and grabbed them. Moving the energy through his fingers effortlessly, he charged them into a stronger attack and threw them back toward Horus. Horus deflected the quick attack, narrowly avoiding harm and sending them crashing into two nearby stone columns.
Can you feel my heart in it now?
Magnus declared to Horus. Beginning to feel tired, yet wanting to stand his ground, Horus replied, "Are you sure you're not confusing your frustration for your belief?" Instantly, Magnus lifted the stone of the broken columns, sending them cascading down upon Horus. Horus snapped his fingers, and in a flash of green, he teleported himself directly behind Magnus, immediately calling down a bolt of lightning upon his opponent. However, Magnus, already turned around facing Horus, conjured two balls of fire and hurled them in Horus's direction. Before they reached Horus, he was already stepping up through the air as though ascending an invisible flight of stairs. While ascending, Horus quickly drew back his right arm past his cheek, as if drawing an arrow in a bow, his left arm extended toward his adversary. A sapphire ball of energy formed in the palm of his hand, as a field of light wrapped around his left forearm, like vines growing on a wall. Flicking his hands, the energy released and split into 3 blue orbs, which converged on Magnus from 3 different directions. Feeling this would be the victory move, for it never failed Horus before. But as he descended, his heart sank, for he witnessed astral arms protruding from Magnus's body in every direction. With this, Magnus grabbed each orb and fused them together and redirected them at Horus. With little time to react, Horus tried to roll away, yet the blast from the attack sent him flying toward the edge of the plateau, stopping himself from falling off. Exhausted and physically drained, Horus could barely stand up, sitting on one knee as Magnus floated closer toward him.
Is this not power enough for you?
Horus, catching his breath, replied, "You have the power, but what you lack is conviction."
Conviction? Maybe this will convince you.
The light in the area quickly grew dim, except for Magnus himself, who began to glow a crimson red. He expelled from his outstretched hands an intense beam of bluish-white light. The surrounding light immediately returned to normal as the beam blasted toward Horus. Using the remainder of his strength, Horus created a golden sapphire shield, safeguarding him from the full impact of the attack. The energy was so intense that Horus could not see Magnus, but hear his loud, echoing voice of the sound of roaring energy.
Is this what you wanted, Mage? Is this not the power of a true sorcerer? What is a mage to my sorcerer's power? Did you really think you could teach me more than I already know?
Horus immediately began to fade as he pondered the words of his apprentice. Rather than focus on the energy pressing down upon him, he withdrew himself into his thoughts. Success? But what success? Last time I supposedly succeeded, I ended up with nothing but failure.
You are worthy, my son. Do not doubt.
The only things that really matter in this great expanse are the things that happen inside your heart.
Often it is those who think themselves wise that always overlook the simplest things. In the end, we are all bound by the rules we live by.
Your skills and powers will improve in time, but what you call failure, I've come to know as growth. The more you learn to trust me, the more you'll come to realize you're already beginning to succeed. Nothing is as it seems. As Horus's thoughts returned to the battle, he opened his eyes through the flashing of Magnus's being. Magnus could barely see this, and becoming overly confident, exerted more power into the beam and announced,
I am the Heralder of Light. I was chosen for this. I was born to be great.
Using what strength he had left, Horus focused on a single point with his magic. Horus extended his free hand and envisioned the smallest and possibly most neglected place inside of Magnus. His inner fear. Beneath the youth's arrogance and pride, he could sense a narrow, yet deep and abiding sense of self-doubt. Arising to his feet, Horus held his defense, taking one step forward. As Magnus saw this, he faltered, and his power simply began to fade. Horus began to advance toward him, and with each step, the energy that had previously held him bound continually diminished. As his doubt took over, Magnus began to lose his resolve. When Horus was within arm's reach, Magnus gave his last thrust of energy in an attempt at victory. However, the blast rebounded off of Horus, and the shockwave knocked the young sorcerer to the ground. As Horus approached his apprentice, he looked thoughtfully upon him, and after a moment, offered him his hand. Magnus wore a look of bewilderment, and dumbfounded, the boy hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly took the mage's hand.
How? How did you defeat me?
But I didn't. You defeated yourself.
I don't understand. I've never lost before.
We don't win by overcoming our opponent. We win by overcoming ourselves. Horus placed a hand on Magnus's shoulder as he helped him to his feet. I sense you don't actually believe that you're the chosen one. And I sense that this is what makes you angry. But how can you be the heralder of light merely because others have told you so? Often, it is those who think themselves wise who overlook the simplest things. For in the end, we are all bound by the rules we live by.
I can't even defeat you. How can I succeed if I don't even believe in myself?
In that moment, Horus smiled in realization at the words he was about to say. The more you learn to trust me, the more you'll come to realize you're already beginning to succeed.
you.